Well, it is the end of the earth, or so it feels like for Luger here when he's quickly going to move to the back seat. Yoko and Taker are sort of married here, and Luger's going to be fighting the un-Americans. And the Taker Yoko program gets real hot. And now there's a bunch of cheers for Bret Hart. It feels like Bret is firmly in the catbird seat to be the next big star. It's not going to be Lex Luger as the next Hulk Hogan. When do you remember that sort of settling in on not just Vince, but the rest of the office? Because it does feel like we're looking for our next Hogan.
All right.
And we're not sure that Lex can be the guy, but we're giving it the old college try. But then Bret sort of reemerges as no, it's still Bret. It's going to be Bret. And it was a stop and start for Bret. They had tried this before, and Yoko beat him, and Hogan came back, and we've covered all that with WrestleMania 9. But now it feels like, okay, we've come to our senses. It really is Bret. Do you remember there being a moment time when that happened?
One moment, no. I know it would have been after SummerSlam. Probably was before SummerSlam, because if the commitment had been made, Conrad, to go with Lex, it would have been that would have been decision would have been made prior to SummerSlam whether you're going to have the match for the title between Yoko and Lex. So I'm saying that sometime that summer, after the Intrepid and before August, the jury came back with a guilty verdict. We're not gonna go there. And again, and I applaud Pat Patterson. You know, Pat was such a devotee of Bret's. And a lot of us were. A lot of guys are kind of older school, believed in Bret's working ability. The fact that he didn't hurt people, as I said earlier, the fact that he was durable, fundamentally sound, and he was not a spot oriented guy. He was a wrestler. And that's why he got over, and we still talk about him. Not because he could do a Hurricane Rana and slap his ass on the headbutt.
Right.
It was just the fact that Bret was that good. And I think it's just unfortunate that he was never given, until later on, the credit that he deserved for being arguably the best in the world. There was a time there where, well, it's always Rick, it's always Shawn, it's always this guy. Hey, what about this Bret Hart guy? I wouldn't want to leave him out of any discussion who was one of the best workers ever. That would make no sense to me. So I think that somewhere along that summer it was discovered or realized, whatever, that Lex was not going to be the answer, unfortunately. And but Vince not the kind of guy that's going to say, well, we spent all this money on it, Conrad. We got to continue on to steer the course. McMahon is big about cutting his losses, and when he's off something, he's off something. I can tell you from experience. So, and he doesn't need a specific reason. It's just a gut feeling. And he would always say to you, he's told me this many times, my track record's pretty good, JR. My track record's pretty good. And it is. Because look where you are in the market share globally. It's not just like you run your little Northeast territory.
Right.
You're the world is your territory now. So I think you've done pretty well with your track record.
Well, the Royal Rumble, it's well remembered for the double finish. You've got Luger and Bret touching at the same time. It's got to be a little nerve wracking from a production standpoint, but they pull it off. What do you think of the finish? Two guys touching the floor at the same time. This is the first time that has happened in the Rumble.
That was a Patterson finish, and you can make an argument that may have been the argument that Patterson gave Vince, who may have said, "Well, let's give Luger one more try." That could have happened. And Pat said, "Vince, it's not going to work. We've done everything we can for him, but Bret's our guy." And they come up with a finish where Bret and Lex both get spotlight. I liked the finish, quite frankly, because it was different. We've always said here on the show, wrestling fans love things that are new and unique, innovative. And I look at that finish as just that, very innovative. And it kept the story alive. to where you left the air with more questions than answers. And I always think that's a good formula.
I love the idea. And ultimately, it does feel like, hey, this could be Luger's chance. And of course, at WrestleMania 10, as we discussed, he comes up short again. It's Bret's night, and he's not going to be the world champion here or anytime in the WWF. After WrestleMania 10, he's off to feud with Mr. Perfect again, but it starts to feel like he's floundering a little bit. He's floating through the mid card with the likes of Crush and Tatanka. Not to disparage those guys, just saying it felt like once upon a time he was going to be the world champ. After WrestleMania 10, is it fair to say that uh, Luger's character is just sort of going through the motions here in the WWF?
Uh, well, for the lack of a better expression, probably. Going through the motions also signifies to me that somebody's not putting out any effort. They're not doing anything extra to get over. I'm not so sure that it was that extreme, but for simplicity's sake, Lex could read the handwriting on the wall.
I see.
His goal to be the champion was shit on in Chicago at SummerSlam. You tell this beautiful story, you get there, and you nothing. There was no climax. I'm not going to go into detail in that analogy, but nonetheless, it just there was no payoff, and the fans felt let down, and then they felt that, well, he's not our guy, and then they try to salvage all that again, revisit it again at the Royal Rumble, rethink it again. And again, we said earlier, the idea would have been we don't know how it would have worked out, but it certainly would have been interesting to see how it would have worked out if Lex had beat Yokozuna at SummerSlam. And you could have done it just as easily as said, this match has no disqualifications. You can lose by disqualification. You can lose because you had Cornette out there and Fuji and all that other cast of thousands. Count outs count the same as a pinfall. We've seen those matches. We've seen those matches. So Yoko could have done the same thing, took a big old bump, didn't make it back in the ring, and Luger wins the title by count out. That could have happened. Would have been ideal? Not really. But if you're just hell bent on not beating Yoko, and that may have been some of the influence of the Undertaker as well, Conrad, because Undertaker loved working with Yokozuna. They drew money. They had a great relationship in and out of the ring, and they sold tickets. So, it was a matter of, well, we can't beat Yoko. It goes back to where when wrestlers are really active wrestlers are really involved in the creative, sometimes it's not totally objective. They're looking out for their own, who's going to butter my bread, so to speak. So there's a lot of backstage stuff that goes on and things like that. But I believe that I think Vince had heard enough from Patterson and maybe even Bruce, I don't know, that it was time to move on from this project. It's just not going to work, Vince. And, he hates to give up on shit. That's why I think probably he rethought. And then he said, well, let's try this at the Rumble. Come up with something, Pat. You created, you created the match. Give me a finish. And the finish they came up with was that both guys hitting at the floor at the same time, which, as you pointed out, is very challenging to pull off. But that was in Tampa. I remember that show. I don't think I did the play-by-play on that show, but I thought the finish was pretty captivating.
So let's just run through the timeline. August 27th is SummerSlam 95, where he's involved in the main event. He's going to do TV tapings in Canton, Ohio on the 28th. And he's going to do TV tapings in Erie, Pennsylvania on August 29th. Those are both for superstars. On the 30th, the company is touring through Niagara Falls. He's in the main event, by the way, tagging with Shawn Michaels to take on Men on a Mission. And the next day, the 31st, they're in Nova Scotia. And again, Luger's in the main event. On the 31st, they did a double shot. There's a show in Ontario. Another show in Ontario on the 1st. Again, it's a double shot with New Brunswick the same day on the 1st. And once again, Luger is in the main event. There's a show on the 2nd in Brantford, Ontario. On the 3rd, they're in St. John's, New Brunswick. And by the way, that's going to be Lex Luger's very last match. And once again, it's the main event. The main event is the Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels teaming with Lex Luger to take on the tag champs Owen and Yoko. And it's Luger's last match because he's going to leave New Brunswick and he's going to go to Minneapolis and make his debut on Monday Nitro. So Sunday night, he's with you in the main event. Monday night, he's on the other channel. It's a pretty impressive little coup for Eric Bischoff and company, is it not?
Yeah, yeah, it was. And obviously, we were unaware that Lex was looking at bolting.
Yeah,
or the booking would have been different. He wouldn't even been booked that week.
He certainly wouldn't have gone on last.
Oh, so yeah, it was a pretty good get for Eric, and the plan worked very well. It seems to me like, because again, when Luger walked out on Nitro there in Minneapolis, it was a big deal. It was a big surprise. Like, one of those, well, if that had been now, it would have been trending that night, big time. That's such a big deal anymore. Trending. So anyhow, yeah, it was a well kept secret. It was a good get for Eric. A well laid out plan that they worked to perfection.
When Lex leaves, I mean, obviously he's working in the main events, but did you see it as a loss? I know that sounds really ugly, and I don't mean for it to, but Bruce has sort of explained on Something to Wrestle that when he and Pat see the monitor and see Lex show up, supposedly Pat says he's their problem now, or something.
I can see that.
Chat me up though. Did you feel like, God damn, what could have been? He slipped through our fingers. We lost him.
No.
Or was it okay?
No. We tried everything, Conrad. There was, what more was there to do? The Lex airplane, the bus, what's next? Airplane. We tried all these things, and the company itself shot themselves in the foot at that SummerSlam in Chicago when Luger had a chance to be a made man and become the champion and see what it would have done to business, to TV ratings, to live event ticket sales, et cetera, et cetera. But we blew it. And maybe we blew it in an educated way. Maybe we didn't really blow it. Maybe just the people change their minds. Events can be hot or cold sometimes. And I think during that summer, as I pointed out earlier, I think it's when he finally said, it's just not going to work.
Right.
And a lot of old promoters would be looking at their expense sheet saying, how much I spent on promoting this guy, not Vince McMahon. He didn't live that way. He just moved on. And that's kind of what I think they decided to do with Lex until somewhere along that winter, summer Royal Rumble's coming up. Let's try this one more time.
Right.
Let's make sure now, because you see how the guy looks. Let's make sure now that we're not screwing this thing up. And as it worked out, Bret Hart was the answer, not Lex Luger.